Okay. And do you recognize that guy right there?
Yes.
That's me. Oh.
Welcome to the Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello and welcome. I have to click OK. We are coming to you again, and as always, from World Headquarters in Middletown, Connecticut, the home of this weekend's amateur intercontinental ballistic missile launching tournament. And we have no idea what things are going to look like around here on Monday. It might be quite the mess. I'm very pleased today to introduce my guest, Paula Parker. Paula and a gentleman who may or may not join us, named Nick Sternberg, had a conversation on LinkedIn one day that caught my eye. And at one point, Paula said, your responses are nothing short of brilliant. Mindset isn't the only thing, it's everything. And boy, could we talk, she said to Nick. So it wasn't quite a dare, but I asked them to come on this show and have that conversation. So I want to introduce my surprise guest. This is my granddaughter, Maya. She lives in Wake Forest, North Carolina, but she's up here visiting us in Connecticut for a while. And Paula, I want to introduce Maya by quoting something you wrote in that conversation with Nick. I like this notion. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's something Nick said. It's a combination of modern circumstance and modern not knowing what you're capable of and how tough you are. And I wrote, when I first printed that conversation, I wrote the word agency. And I have to tell you that Maya is one reason that I have a tremendous degree of hope, because this little girl is full of agency and knows very much what she's about. Would you like to tell everybody where you go to school?
I go to North Valley Christian Academy.
And how well do you do in school?
I don't know.
What she means to say is she makes honors every quarter. And she is very sure of herself and very curious, inquisitive, and expressive. And is there anything else that you would like to say about maybe how responsible you are at home and how you help your mom and dad?
Well, I take the dog for a walk. Sometimes I do house chores.
I went down to stay with Maya and her brother when my son Sean took his wife Lauren away for their 10th anniversary. And Maya helped me do the dishes and asked me to take a picture of them so that I could show her mom and dad what she did to help me. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I
still have that picture. Okay. All right. You want to go back down and be with Danny and Eddie? Okay, go ahead, sweetheart. Thank you. Anyway, she's exactly as special as she looks. In response to something you said, Paula, and this is what prompted your comment back to Nick. Nick said, I like this notion of becoming less fragile by realizing the material is inferior to the mindset. I know Nick said that, but you certainly agreed with him. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Well, from my perspective, relative to mindset, as I said in my earlier response, mindset is everything. And how I would view that is if, in relation to the material, so to speak, that Nick was mentioning, things and situations face us all the time. And it's not necessarily the thing, the situation, or the material, so to speak. It's one's perspective about that. I'll use a quick story, because as much as I like theory, heavily theoretical in Hermetic wisdom and philosophy that I implement into, I work with business owners to implement some of these principles into advancing their business, starting a new vertical, et cetera, et cetera. But I also like, theory doesn't mean anything to me unless I have practical application of that. So in terms of a specific example, I'm on our condo board. I was recruited to be on our condo board, and there had been some difficulties in the community regarding trash. The community is an older community, so residents would have to push their trash out to the street. There wasn't curbside service, and I was approached to become a board member, and I said, okay, I'll become a board member, and I just explicitly said, I will only become a board member if we can accomplish some things, because I just don't like sitting around talking about things. And they kind of all agreed, and they realized that once I was on the board, the genie was out of the bottle. So the trash issue was a mounting issue, and that was last August. I was first on the board. So long story short, we now have private trash. We're launching private trash. But the opposition that I met up with from some of the resident body, like all of the reasons why it can't be done, every single reason that you could possibly imagine. So that would be, in my mind, the material in a very broad sense. All of the reasons why it could not be done. And I understand, because I have knowledge of, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have clients that are. So I understand the depth of why people will always err to the worst possible outcome versus the best possible outcome. But in terms of Nick's comment about the material, I don't allow the material to, I don't want to say sway my vision, but in essence, I don't allow the material to sway the vision or sway what the overall goal is. I might have to sort of navigate through that material. However, I don't let the material, I don't let what is impact my approach or the overall goal. I don't know if that makes sense to you at all.
Oh, it absolutely.
But I like to give concrete examples relative to tools and practical application of sometimes some I say some abstract things on LinkedIn a lot. So, but I also like to clarify. I also like to clarify that abstractness.
Why do you think it is that it almost seems to be people's default to become preoccupied with what can't be done or what is not, rather than what can be done and what's possible? As a result of having been to so many schools I can't count to share my children's books, I've learned that children are not at all like that. And I can never figure out. I talked to somebody over the weekend who said she thought it was somewhere between age 8 and 10 that people start to lose that inherent, I'll say it again, agency, conviction about themselves. Do we give it up? Is it taken from us? What happens?
I think that's a brilliant question. I think, and I certainly don't have all the answers to everything there is to know about everything there is to know. This would be just my sort of impression of things, in that children are really born pure. They come with an undaunting sense of possibility and potential. And the age 8 to 10 might be sort of coincide with sort of being socialized out of that, the you can'ts, or the social, Dr. David Hawkins of Power versus Force refers to it as buying into social programming, but without question. I don't know if children do that, but it seems that they become conditioned out, and all the reasons why you can't. And back to this trash issue, I said to the team, I said to the residents, we had, the Zoom meeting and so on and so forth, because everything is by consensus when you're on a board, and that's fine. And I just said, I never lead an initiative thinking it's going to fail. I just don't do that. That's not how I roll. And the business owners that I work with don't lead into any new initiative, a new vertical, a new whatever the initiative. They don't lead into it thinking it's going to fail. There's neurological reasons for why humans think the way they do, why they lean towards the worst possible outcome versus the best possible outcome. And that's kind of hard coded into our DNA. I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not going to speak to that. I can speak more along the lines of metaphysical principles, in that we speak in patterns. We think in patterns, we language in patterns, and it's almost like we continuously repeat. We look at what we don't want, we look at it, and then it begins to repeat. But there's a gap somewhere in there that if you can sort of suspend that object reality and use your imagination to think of something that's different, you have a chance at sort of achieving a goal that nobody thinks is possible. And it happened on a larger scale. There was a, I think I may have told you this story, Mark. When we first moved to where we live now, we left a city of 100,000 people and moved to a small town, very quaint, about 18,000 people. And it didn't have the design sophistication that I was accustomed to. I also, before I started my own practice, I worked at a global architectural engineering and construction consulting firm. So I kind of cut my teeth on the AEC industry, very involved in design, very involved in architecture from a project management perspective. So when we moved to this cute little town, it was cute little town, didn't have a lot of design sophistication. And I said, oh, geez, why isn't there a design review board in the town? Because developers were just building willy-nilly. Well, I got, again, from municipal employees, well, that can't be done. It's not possible. I said, and then somebody from the redevelopment authority kind of pulled me aside, an architect. He says, you're the kind of person that, you know, I think I could team with so that we could start this design review committee. Long story short, I was told that it wouldn't happen. I was the ad hoc chair of the committee, helped to write the bylaw for the town so that they could adopt it, but worked very closely with the Attorney General of municipal law in Massachusetts to write the language, and it was stamped. They said, oh, it's not going to happen. It'll take a year to pass and go through the AGO's office. And because I had developed a relationship with this woman, she knew the language, and she stamped it within 2 weeks. And it was, so when people say that it can't be done, I don't listen, because that's their perspective, and that's fine. Everybody has their perspective. That's just not my perspective. It's just not my perspective. So being told that it can't be done is something that I don't want to say I take with a grain of salt, but it's working with the vision, working within the imagination, working with all of the faculties that are really not seen, and giving those faculties legs so that it does gain momentum. And I went on to another project, which was a stretch of a 2-mile road that was blighted, in urban development terms, run down, blighted. And I used to call development companies and say, you know, why don't you start a project here? And they'd say, seriously, Paul, look at this road. It's a dump. I wouldn't bring a client here. So I led the charge. I was project chair of the project working group to secure $21 million in state funding to revitalize this entire road. And they called me crazy. They said I was smoking weed, this project would never happen, all of those things. And I had to direct a municipal team. I had to work with our senators. I had to work with, and now every time I ride down that road, I feel like Bugsy Siegel. Everybody thought Bugsy Siegel was crazy when he had a vision for a casino in the middle of a desert, and he could see it, but the people around him could not see it. So I try not to let the limits, and that's where I think children, to bring it back to your question, I think that's where children are invaluable in terms of their sense of possibility.
Yeah, and I have the distinct sense that they can remind us, if we're willing to pay attention, that we can get that back. I want to pick up on two things that you said. Well, you talked about social conditioning. And then I think, and you also mentioned patterns. And I think those things translate to habits. And I wonder if those habits, as adults, if those habits contribute to our fear of change?
Again, well, if we don't question, I always say to my clients, is what you're doing working? Is the way that you're thinking getting you closer or further away to whatever the initiative is that you want? And people need to sort of do a mindset house cleaning, so to speak. I had a client one time. I said, just write, and I listen to I listen to the way clients speak, because that gives me such brilliant information in terms of where they stand on a particular subject. Anytime a client says to me, I can't afford it, we can't do this because I can't afford it. Those words in metaphysical philosophy, one of the tenets is, with my words, I create. People don't realize how much of an instruction we're giving to our entire body. The body is the mind body is inseparable. It's inseparable. Our body takes instructions by the language that we consistently speak. It shapes our cells. It plays a huge role in our physical health. That's a whole other topic that I'm not qualified to speak on. However, I listen to language patterns. So when you say habit, a language pattern is a habit. It's like a default. And I had a client one time, I said, just write down the phrases that you use. And then on the other side of the page, I said, write the things that you have in your life, your house, your business, your wife, what have you, and the things that you keep saying. I said, and then just kind of look and see if there's a correlation between everything that you're saying on one side of the page and what you have in your life on the other side of the page. And it seems like just a simple and almost pedestrian exercise, but a lot of people just aren't really aware of the words that they use as a habit. And then life just keeps perpetuating. It can't do that. Afraid to do that. Don't have enough money to do that. Well, what if you opened up your mind and said, maybe it's possible. Maybe there could be a way that we could possibly do this. So I don't know if it's language habit, or people just are unconscious of the things and the words. But I know there's a direct correlation between what happens in a person's life and the language that they're using consistently.
I wonder about that consciousness too. And what I mean specifically is whether people are necessarily conscious of what they're saying. I think in a lot of ways, I think I'm afraid of AI, artificial intelligence. But sometimes I wonder, especially if I'm listening to people speak at length, if we were able to record their conversations, and you might not even need AI to do this, but to analyze what they're saying and then output some results from that, and then show it to them and just ask them, are you aware? Are you aware of that? Are you aware that this is the way you speak? Are you aware that this is nothing other than a reflection of the way you think? And are you aware of the ways in which you think might be inhibiting you? Do you think that would be instructive or off-putting and alienating to people?
I think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's all in how it's approached, so that an individual's defenses aren't raised. And if a person has a sincere desire to change, because when there's resistance to anything, there's nothing that's going to get through. That's why it's never good to go into a negotiation with anger, because anger is a constrictive energy. So I think it's a brilliant idea. There is, in fact, a very famous hypnotherapist that uses this exactly. Her name is Marissa Peer, and her model is language. She examines the language clients used, and she began her work with infertility clients. She was an infertility specialist, so to speak. So women would come to her and saying that they couldn't get pregnant, and she would discuss and she would listen to the language that the woman would use, and and she'd take them back to maybe when they were 16 years old. It's like, I'm dating this guy, my father doesn't like him, I could never get pregnant, my father would kill me. So it was years of that kinds of programming, and she's a hypnotherapist, she would get into the psyche and change the dialogue and change the meaning of what that person was saying. When you change what something means, everything changes. Everything changes. And her work is brilliant. She's world renowned. She works with athletes and celebrities, and she has a whole host of books. But it's interesting because I happened upon her recently, and I thought, well, my goodness, it's like she's a hypnotherapist. I'm not a hypnotherapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. However, the similarity in terms of language. So I think, Mark, your suggestion, when people are just sort of freeform having a discussion, and then if they were to sort of hear themselves, it's like, you always say that. I mean, husbands and wives do it to each other. Why do you always say that? Or a good friend will say, what are you saying that for? Don't say that. I think the power of our language is completely underestimated, and the power that it does have. And I'm not saying that we could talk. How many people do you know that say, you know what, I'm good for a cold every season without fail. I'm good for a cold, and they get a cold. And then there are others that say, you know what, I'm as strong as an ox. I never get sick. I'm always healthy. And it kind of sort of, if you just observe and pay attention, and you don't have to go anywhere. Just look in your own life, in your family or your friends, and just sort of observe the language. And I think it's pretty powerful.
It is very powerful. I'll say more about this in maybe I won't have to, because we have a couple more minutes. But I had the opportunity to do a book signing at a local Barnes and Noble this past Saturday.
Congratulations.
And my publisher, the Barnes and Noble was in Glastonbury, Connecticut. My publisher's in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She came to the thing, and she's a very intuitive, spiritual person, and she brought a friend with her who is also that way. And we had a fascinating conversation about the power of language, and the power of language to influence. And someone once asked me, I'm not a believer or follower of that guy Simon Sinek, but someone once asked me, could you state your why in 5 words? So I'm a writer, I get to cheat, so I hyphenated. And I said, I write to restore self-faith. And then I paused for a second, and I said to this woman, and I don't mean mine. My strongest desire is to get people to recognize or re-engage their own, I'm going to say this again, agency, what they're capable of. All right, I'm going to change direction completely when we come back. So let's do our first commercial break right now. We'll see everyone in 3 minutes. Please stick around.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. And I'm happy to welcome Paula back with us as well. Paula, there you go.
There I am.
When I was first thinking about this show and the fact that you and I were supposed to have been joined by Nick Sternberg, and given what I know of the two of you, which is arguably not all that much, but from my impressions of the two of you, I thought it could be named the spiritualist and the pragmatist. I actually suspect that you're a combination of spiritualism and pragmatism, but I take Nick to be, I think I want to say a hardcore pragmatist. So again, I wish he could be here to explore this topic with us. But the conversation that I had on Saturday after the book signing, also got into the ostensible spiritual awakening that's going on. And, one of the women in the conversation referred to it as the age of Aquarius. And I actually believe in it. I actually believe that I see signs of that awakening. And yet, the world appears to be an increasingly disastrous political mess. How in the world can we square those two things? Or is my even asking the question a matter of impatience?
First of all, I think your assessment of me and Nick is correct. And it's funny because I started a Substack, and my Substack is called The Celestial Pragmatist. So
I'll be a subscriber.
And it's funny because I, as an advisor, have an advisor who's further ahead of me on this evolution of consciousness and in the metaphysical, the study of metaphysics. And we were having a discussion. Now, the hardcore metaphysicians are not on social media. And the reason they explain is that there's too much energetic distortion. There's too many clashes of opinions. There's too much sort of distortion, because in a metaphysician, another credo that they have is all things are energy first. We're energy. Humans are energy. Things are energy. It's so they stay off of social media. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. I don't really want to place a value judgment on it, but they're not on social media because of this sort of environment. And my advisor, she said, we were having this discussion. I said, it's hard sometimes to sort of maintain your center and maintain clear energy amidst the discourse that's out there. And she said, people are waking up. She says, but right now, it's like a really bad movie made by people with really sick minds. And so having to reconcile that, having to sort of function in the world amidst sort of this tsunami of emotions that come at us I think it's a challenge for myself, as well as I'm sure everybody else. Not that I like to speak for everybody else, but it is a challenge. And this, again, Mark, gets back to not focusing on what is and not focusing on what we don't want, because people will talk endlessly about everything that they don't want. But that energy doesn't contribute to building what you do want. So if I'll go back to the road analogy, when I first, so I was a stringer for Gatehouse Media, which was purchased by Gannett. And when Gannett purchased it, they got rid of all local writers. So I kind of found myself without a home, because I had a column. They called it Parker's Perspective. I had a column since 2007. And I was like I stuck out like a sore thumb, because I wasn't a beat reporter. I'm not a beat journalist. I'm a writer I take big, broad concepts and compress them using known schemas, using analogy, to give the reader something to uplift themselves, to uplift their life, to perhaps change a perspective, to provoke an opening, a potential, a possibility. So I started writing about this road, this dump. And I wrote it as if I was walking down a completed road with granite curbs and sidewalks and artisan bakery shops and flowers and wrought iron lighting. And this was in 2010. The road didn't start construction until 2020. And so I put myself out there in the public square. And this is when people said, Paula Parker is smoking weed, because I immersed myself in the embodied experience, as if I was walking down the road like it was completed. I wasn't complaining about the fact that it was blighted. I wasn't complaining that there were no sidewalks. I wasn't complaining. I took my energy and I flowed it towards what I wanted to see. And that's another. It's a significant principle in metaphysics. We turn away from what we don't want, and it's not ignoring, because it takes the mental discipline of Hercules to understand what is, and then funnel all of your energy towards what it is that you want to have, what you want to create. So social media is just a regurgitation of all the things that people don't want, whatever camp, person, party you're in, whatever it is, it's just and it doesn't change. I worked in film and television production for 5 years, many decades ago, and I worked with presidential campaign, did gubernatorial, senator. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. It's like, so, but we can change how we look at it. So if there is a spiritual awakening looming and people are sort of waking up, a very important factor is that people need to walk the talk. They can't just say that, I'm evolving, I'm awakening, because you can't. If you're at one level of consciousness and you move to the next level, you have to embody that level of consciousness, and that's your perspective. So if you go from rage to anger to what's the next step? There's rage, anger. If you go to you can't jump from anger to hope. But if you elevate up the level, your whole perspective changes. So the folks that are awakening, it can be somewhat shocking to wake up, but also you have to live from that perspective. You have to live from that spiritually evolved perspective, because you can't just go back to what it was you were doing before, because that's where you'd stay, so to speak.
This is the second time in 5 days that what I'm about to say has come up in conversation. Have you ever seen Beatlemania?
I have not.
All right, I resisted seeing that for years because I was a huge Beatles fan and I had zero interest in seeing four guys pretend to be the Beatles.
Right.
I didn't know it until I saw it, but I had absolutely missed the point. And I came out of Beatlemania having cause and effect on my mind. Because in the way this show was constructed, I couldn't tell if the music of the Beatles had influenced social and cultural events or if social and cultural events had informed their music. I really couldn't tell. But given what you were just saying, and especially about social media and the way, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, but the way it can be or is detrimental to the achievement of some higher consciousness, is there some cause and effect there? And what I mean is, it seems to me that social media, by and large, and I will tell you that my comment at the beginning about the amateur intercontinental ballistic missile launching this weekend, that came from that same conversation 5 days ago, in which someone in the conversation made a comment about X, which used to be Twitter, and people just being able to jump on there, have no idea what they're talking about, and just start firing. And I wonder if by and large, social media and its conduciveness to echo chambers doesn't have some cause on the effect of delaying the advancement of social consciousness, because people can just get on there, find people they agree with, and gripe about all the stuff they don't like or don't want. Never occurred.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle, Mark.
Yeah.
So if people are on social media and they're complaining about something, and everybody gets on there and also complains, what they're doing is they're locking themselves into their own complaint. They're locking themselves into their own misery, because if you're thinking and talking about something that you don't like, you're not thinking and talking about what you like and where you want. So there's a famous quote by Buckminster Fuller: "You don't fight against the existing reality, you build a new model that makes the old one obsolete." And that's a metaphysical principle. It's like you withdraw the energy and the attention from what it is that you don't want, and you funnel it to what it is that you do want. So eventually that becomes, and humans are conditioned to it. Social media was developed. This is Sean Parker, one of the founding, he was the president of Facebook, admitted in an Axios interview that they used neuroscience to develop, they all did it. They used neuroscience to develop Facebook, Instagram, the social media platforms, because it addicts. They understand how the brain works, the reward centers of the brain, the social acceptance, all the human vulnerabilities, and they use that. It's kind of like what they do with slot machines. The folks that design slot machines know how the human mind works, and it's not cumulative. It's like every time you pull that lever, you're starting all over again. It's not cumulative, but some people think that, oh, the more I pull that lever, I'm going to get that hit, that reward. My brain center is going to get that reward. Social media is like that, and I'm not anti-social media. I think that there are some great uses for social media, but from my perspective, and most of my metaphysical friends who are not on social media, because they don't want to get sort of sucked into that, perpetuate the loop that perpetuates the sameness. Or it's like, if you look at the problems that we've had since the dawn of civilization, they just scroll over and over and over again. There were mean people in power during the Roman Empire. There are mean people in power. So it's like, if we want to break that, the conversation needs to shift. It's like, when I comment on social media, I always try. I'm a Gemini, so my evil twin is Gina, and sometimes Gina will get a hold of the keyboard, and I'll just say something that maybe adds to and doesn't uplift. But for the most part, I would say 97% of how I comment is to point people. in the direction of potential or possibility. It's just how I'm wired. That's just how I'm wired. It's like and that's why when somebody says to me, you can't do that, I just kind of smile and nod. I'm like, okay, thank you. Thank you. And there's no disrespect to anybody ever, but I will not allow the limits of another person to impede my evolution or my growth, because that's just not how that works. They will impede if I listen and I absorb and adopt what they're saying, but I don't. And it's like, you think that your granddaughter, I can tell, she has a tremendous sense of agency and sovereignty. And as a little girl, I would stand up against my very autocratic old world Italian father and say, no, I don't believe what you believe. I believe what I believe. So it started in me very young. So, and back to your question, your comment about social media, I think if people just know that, and it is what it is, or they know it for what it is, and don't let it sort of sink into the animosity or the, as the metaphysicians say, emotional distortion or the emotional baggage. If they don't let it sort of seep inward and just can recognize it for what it is.
Yep.
But I think it does to a certain degree hold humanity in abeyance, because I have this discussion with one of my editors. He says, it's the Flesh Kincaid reading, for newspapers, 8th grade, for the Times and the Journal, it's 12th grade. I'm like, aren't we holding people in abeyance to further learning? It's like, why don't you, as a teacher, you have people stretch. Okay, so you don't go from 8th grade to PhD level, but right. You sort of you throw some words in there that the reader might say, "Ooh, geez, I don't understand. I don't know what that word means. Let me look it up." But you help them expand. We are such expansive creatures that can do just amazing things. So,
we're gonna. You've given me a perfect segue. We're going to take our second commercial break now, and we'll pick up segment 3 when we come back. So everyone, please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back to The Anxious Voyage, everyone. Paula, I want to share with you something that I wrote in the midst of a LinkedIn thread this morning. That was started by a comparison of our two presidential candidates. Okay. And so I looked at that and wondered if I had anything worthwhile to contribute to that thread. And this is what I realized, and I'm quoting myself. This thread is clear indication of why we are where we are. It's a combination of a partisan show and a flame-throwing contest. We're not having a conversation. We're not attempting to persuade each other with sound arguments based on valid premises. We're haggling like deaf street vendors who only want to exact their prices. And we're turning yet another election into an ideological fashion show. With that in mind, and given what we've been talking about, and if we accept as fact that this conscious awakening is going on, how do we get from that LinkedIn thread that I saw this morning to where we need to be? And I'll ask the question again. Is the very asking of that question an indication of my impatience?
I don't know if it's impatience, but the question does need to be asked. And I look at these situations through the lens of levels of consciousness. So to use the crucifixion as an analogy, there were people that just were in a certain level of consciousness that viewed Jesus in a particular way. And we know that story. But when you elevate your consciousness, life looks very different. It just looks very different. And then again, you have to behave based upon the particular level of consciousness. Raising one's consciousness is an individual job. It's an individual pursuit. Some people do, some people don't. It's their personal choice. So I can take an extreme, and a person they can only exhibit their level of consciousness, no more, no less. They maybe can dip into certain levels, but for the most part, so you take an extreme, someone who's a savage killer. They're at a certain level of consciousness. It's what they do. It's not who they are. They're in that level of consciousness. But if they begin to elevate, then that falls away. The problem, I shouldn't say the problem, the challenge is that individual level of consciousness. No one can raise that for you. They can't raise it for me. I have to do the work. That's why when I have conversations, changing the culture of a company, leadership, organizational culture, I'm like, nothing changes unless the levels of consciousness change. Otherwise, people go, they do a keynote, it's great, rah, rah. And then, they want to change the culture of the company. It's like, not even a psychologist could do that. Not even a psychiatrist. Maybe Sigmund Freud, but if a person doesn't want to change, if they don't want to evolve and get to the higher levels of consciousness, where acceptance and love and joy and bliss, those are very high states of consciousness. And when you're in a high state of consciousness, you don't hate anybody. You have a different, and I'm not trying to make the whole world turn into a Zen monk or say that we need to be on a mount somewhere to sort of raise our level of consciousness. But if we looked at the collective consciousness, there was David Hawkins, again, MD, PhD, Power versus Force. I mean, just a whole host of books, who made it his business. He was a hardcore psychiatrist, had his sort of threshold moment, and was the nexus of psychiatry and spirituality. And he would examine humanity at large through the lens of levels of consciousness. So from the extremes, from the people who just murder just for no reason, like the MS-13 gangs, satanic members, to Jesus and all of the levels in between, we have to elevate consciousness. But that's an individual task. That's an individual responsibility.
Kenneth Burke, who was a teacher, philosopher, lecturer, said, an ideology is like a spirit taking up its abode in a body, and it will make that body hop around in certain ways. And if a different ideology had happened, makes it hop around in certain ways. If a different ideology had happened to inhabit it, it would hop around in different ways. Do you distinguish, and I'm thinking of what you said about M13, do you distinguish between ideology and levels of consciousness?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't profess to understand a person's immediate level of consciousness, but it's somewhat easy to discern, because if you just watch someone's actions. But there are other things that come into play, sort of cultural programming and societal programming and parental programming and all of this sort of, and then ideological. But it is fairly easy to see sort of where somebody sits in a level of consciousness. And I don't know how much ideology would play into that, because ideology in terms of level of consciousness, there are very specific, I wouldn't say it's ideology, I would say there's very specific sets of associated behaviors on the different levels of consciousness. A person in anger, if his car is hit from behind, he'll fly into a rage. A person in shame will say, oh, it's always my fault. It's always, and as they progress up the levels, somebody who's sort of acceptance is like, well, yeah, accidents happen. We both have insurance companies. So the behaviors that are, so level of consciousness is a determinant of behavior. According to David Hawkins, I happen to believe that. And I'm not a religious person. I was raised Roman Catholic, but then I went out and studied all, and I've sort of landed on a philosophy that resonates with me, because I like to apply it and I like to see that it's working. But by their fruits ye shall know them. That was meant to be, in the metaphysical perspective, by their fruits, how they act, you will know what their level of consciousness is. So it's pretty easy to sort of, if you just sort of, again, observe, and you can kind of have a sort of an idea of where somebody is in level of consciousness. I'm not quite sure how ideology, because I think that once you get into the higher levels of consciousness, ideology goes away. And you're in that love or joy or bliss. Those states are a challenge to reach.
One of the things that I enjoy most, in fact, it kind of amuses me, is watching my own theories be shot down in flames. So I just developed another one. I suspect that anyone who achieves a sufficient level of consciousness, I don't even know how else to explain that, would be willing and able to recognize and examine his own ideology. I was in an email exchange with a person once, and I shared that Kenneth Burke quote with this person. And this person wrote back and said, I don't have an ideology. And I said, I wish Kenneth Burke were still alive, because you just proved this point. But if that gentleman's consciousness had been elevated, I suppose is the right verb, he would have been able to recognize that his leanings are ideological, and they're ideological because they're unexamined. And if you're not of sufficient consciousness to examine your own ideologies, then the LinkedIn thread that I commented on this morning is the result. Everybody's stuck in their little things and with their blinders on. No. I'm not seeing your point. Yours is different from mine. Necessarily, then you're wrong. Obviously, that doesn't work. I'm going to share one more thing with you, and then I want you to tell our listeners how and where they can find you. I saw a post once from someone I happen to know, and I didn't know it at the time, but he was promoting his own social media app, which he said was not a social media app. And someone once told me, never believe anything until it's officially denied. But he said, and he was implying that if you use his app, we could achieve world peace in 2 generations. And I thought, wow, maybe that's possible on the planet you're on, but not this one. We've had a whole lot more than 2 generations, I think, and we haven't even gotten close. And it reminds me, one more point, it reminds me of a book that was written actually quite some years ago by a psychotherapist named James Hillman. And it was the result of some conversations he had with a journalist named Michael Ventura, and they named their book, "We've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world's getting worse." So comment on that if you will, and then please let our listeners know how they can find you if they're, and please tell us the name of your Substack again. If they would like to read your work, if they would like to be in touch with you, how do they do that?
Best way is through my website, www.paulamparker.net. M for meatball, so it's paulamparker.net. And my Substack is The Celestial Pragmatist. Just get on Substack and look me up. You can find me there. But you can email me through my website. That's probably the best way. And this has just been an absolute pleasure.
Well, and I was just going to say the same thing to you, Paula M. Parker. I am going to admit that when I realized that Nick wasn't going to show up, I was actually nervous. And this conversation has been the most effortless one on any of the shows I've done since I started in August. So I thank you so very much.
Well, thank you. The conversation flowed, and before when we were talking before we were on air, it's like I can fill an hour. I could fill 2. I could fill maybe 3.
Well, I have a feeling
it's been a great conversation.
We're going to fill some more hours. So again, thank you very much. And to the rest of you who are good enough to join us today, I thank you too. I will be back with another guest 2 weeks from today at 1 p.m. Eastern. I hope you'll join us. Thank you and bye for now.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.